Welcome to the Beyond Digital Transformation podcast. In this podcast episode of the Beyond Digital Transformation Connectivity and Communication Stream, sponsored by Aviva, Sudbury I&O, the Glencore Company, and Mica, we dive deep into the topic of accessing operations data in remote-first mining environments. This panel was designed and hosted by Greg Sandblom, Superintendent of Innovation and Technology at Glencore, with panelist Milan Ursay from Raglan Mine, bringing the remote mine site perspective, and two subject matter experts with global mining experience, Roland Plett from Cisco, sharing his deep knowledge of connectivity and how other operations are tackling this challenge, and Martin Provencher, sharing his experience of unique use cases involving mining company and vendor collaboration, of how and why mine sites would leverage their operations data to enhance and improve the reliability of assets for their operations.
Everyone, welcome to the next session in our connectivity and communication stream. This is our second session in a group of 4 panel discussions that we have. I'm going to run through a few introductions, but first I wanted to go through some basics about what Beyond Digital Transformation 2022 is all about. BDT is a platform for results-driven mining professionals who want to deploy systems that deliver measurable impacts for their mining operations, and each stream brings together 3 unique perspectives from mine operations, mine industry partners, and mine industry suppliers. And those perspectives here are brought together by the co-chairs of the connectivity and communication stream. The first is Charles Nibes. We have Martin Provencher from Aviva, who's one of our guest panelists, and myself, Greg Sandblom, who is with Sudbury's Glencore operations. So again, welcome to this session. In our first session for the communications and connectivity stream, we explored the general challenges and opportunities in connectivity in remote mining operations from 2 perspectives, actually. Working remotely from the site and also working remotely within the site. So for example, being underground and working away from your desk, how do we deliver information to those people who are remote actually on the site? And today we're privileged to have 3 distinguished panelists with unique views in this area. And we're going to talk in more detail about accessing operations data when working remotely. So on the call, we have Roland Plett from Cisco. He's the global lead for energy and mining from Cisco. Milan Hers, who is a senior mine engineer at Raglan Operations for Glencore, and Martin Provencher, who is the industry principal for Aviva. Again, thanks to the 3 of you for joining. I'm looking forward to having a great discussion, but I'm going to hand it over to the 3 of you to introduce yourselves in more detail. Roland, go ahead first.
My name's Roland
Plett. Go ahead, Roland.
Yeah, I'm with Cisco Systems, and I've been in the communications industry for about 25 years or so, and mostly in the Canadian market. I live in Calgary, Alberta, in the foothills, close to the Rockies, where it apparently is still snowing today. And it's, of course, that's not a new thing for any of the Canadian mining people. First of all, I've been working in the global role, as Greg indicated, for a few years now, really working with mining companies around the world. A lot of activity in Australia and in Canada, 2 big hubs for mining, and also in the US. And so I'm looking forward to having this discussion. Of course, communications is a huge part of the mine operations these days. And so looking forward to having that conversation here today.
Thanks, Roland. We'll move on to Milan.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Milan Ursay. I'm a mining engineer. I'm working for Raglan now for 9 years this summer. And I work also before Raglan for a mining equipment supplier and also for a consultant building a new mine. So I work on each side of the fences. And with my role at Raglan, I've been doing a lot of project in innovation, which mainly on equipment, where we introduce new type of equipment at Raglan, new technology, tele-remote, for example, other type of truck, and also infrastructures. But since the end of 2018, I'm one of the project lead to install telemetry, proximity detection, and geolocation at Raglan. We're deploying, once everything is deployed, now we're using the data. So that gives you a quick overview of my background.
Thanks, Milan. And next is Martin, and Martin's going to introduce himself and then share a video that we attempted to show in the first session, but it didn't work. The technology let us down. So I think we've got it working this time. We'll share that video afterwards and have a brief Q&A after the video is shown.
That's good. Thanks, Greg. So my name is Martin Provencher from Quebec, Canada. I'm the global industry principal for mining companies. I work actually with mining companies from all around the world. I'm also vice chair of the Maintenance, Engineering and Reliability Society of the Canadian Institute of Mining. Studied technology and artificial intelligence 30 years ago. Started in IT manager, things like that, and then moved to production director, so in charge of operations and maintenance for a couple of years. And then after that, from a personal interest, I wanted to go back to technology and to work with mining companies. I love helping mining companies leverage data and technology to improve their performance. So that's basically my role within Aviva now.
Thank you, Martin. And we'll move to the video now. So I was going to ask a quick question on that because the video did come with a big portion of it was data unification and value that comes from data unification. And Martin, maybe you just comment on where you see early value on bringing that data together off equipment and so on.
Yes, for sure. There's a couple of main areas where companies are leveraging that data coming from their assets. Mainly two of the main areas, of course, health and safety, environmental compliance are critical these days. So a lot of companies are leveraging operational data to make sure that they can, for example, implement compliancy rules in their operational data platform. That's one of the big things. The other two main aspects I see where most companies are actually starting with is from an energy management perspective. So leveraging the data to help improve energy efficiency. This is one big thing that we see. And also the other one is from a reliability or maintenance perspective. A lot of companies are leveraging operational data to help them save a lot of money. Syncrude, for example, in Canada, they've presented they saved more than $20 million on their whole trucks, leveraging operational data. And the same for fixed assets. Rio Tinto at Kennecott, they saved more than $12 million on the first 6 months they've implemented predictive analytics. So these are just a couple of examples where we see that once you start leveraging the operational data and then you start using advanced analytics, there are hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars that you can save in terms of money very easily, if I may say it like that.
Good. That's great. Thanks for the perspective. We're gonna jump into our discussion soon. There's a few things I wanted to communicate to people. One of these our upcoming events. So 2022 upcoming panel events in June of 2022. We're going to carry forward what we're discussing today, and we're going to get into some case studies around telemetry, AI, cloud services for managing data, and so on. So that'll be in June of 2022, and in August of 22, we're actually going to get into the use cases. So what are the primary use cases? I think Martin touched on a few of them right there, but use cases as far as dashboards go, as far as using business intelligence to deliver data to the right people. That'll be coming in August of 2022. So we're basically moving forward in this as a journey within our stream panelists, and today is getting into the technology of how do we actually get the data and what do we do with the data once we've got it, and then it'll progress into the applications and how the data is used. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about our BDT community. So first of all, it does bring the mining companies' perspectives to the table, and it drives industry collaboration. So it's miners helping miners. But the most important part of BDT is that since its inception, it's donated more than $100,000 to charities. And for 2022, the Sudbury Action for Youth is our charity of choice. Really appreciate all the work that's been done by Neha's team and the work that her partners have put in place to deliver. And thanks to all the sponsors who have donated and helped out charities, local charities in the communities that we work in. This year, I'd like to thank the sponsors for this stream, Redpath Mining. We're contractors and engineers, and they provide full service mining solutions around the world since 1962. And the other partner sponsor is Paystock Global, digital adoption specialists, and they help you achieve measurable results with your technology that you put in place. With that said, I'm going to jump right in. And again, this session is more getting back to the basics. How do we actually get the data? I think that we talk about all these great things that we can do with the data once we have it, but there's specific challenges that I think everybody on this call can relate to, and probably the attendance of the call can relate to. Just getting the data from operations into the hands of the right people is very challenging. So the first question I'm going to pose to the panelists is what is the most challenging aspect from a technology standpoint as it relates to accessing data when working remotely? Please jump in.
If I say for Raglan, which we're a remote site, accessing data is not easy just because we're not connected to the grid or to the internet. Our link to internet is a satellite. So in that case, everything needs to be on server that are on premise, so locally, where we need enough space, enough server, enough IT resources to maintain it or to fix it when there's a problem. Where when you're in what we call in the south, you can have your data in an Amazon cloud that if there's a problem with the server, they have multiple server as a backup. So I'll say that's a challenge for us where it took some time in 2020 to receive the proper server, install it, put redundancy. So that was our biggest challenge, is to build our network to receive tons of information and data.
Yeah, and maybe I can jump in here. From what I see with customers that I work with, um, network connectivity, especially for underground mines, is very often quite a challenge. But what's important to notice today is that there are lots of technology that are available today. For example, Wi-Fi technology has been used in a couple of places. Satellite network, of course, for open pit mine, Baffinland, Hiron mines here in Canada, they've used satellite communication. Of course, 5G, 4G, 5G networks are being used quite heavily. For example, Bulletin, ITIC mine in Sweden, they've implemented a 5G network. Here in Canada, Kirkland Lake Gold also implemented a 5G network. And also there's mesh networking technology that I see a couple of mining companies, Agnico Eagle, for example, BHP, some of them are using mesh networking technology. So there's a lot of technology available. Of course, you have to identify which one is the most suitable for your operations, but definitely the technology today is available. It's just a matter of selecting which one does fit the best for people's needs.
So Martin, are you referring to the technology within the mine site or connecting to the wide area network?
The main challenge when I speak with companies, the main challenge that they have is to get access from the mine site, to get access to the data from the mine site. Most of the companies I talk with, they already have a network for when they have an office, or network connectivity is there because it's probably much easier to implement a network connectivity at the office. But getting the data out of the mine site, this is where companies are struggling. So that's why I'm saying that the technology is there to get access to that data, even underground for underground mines. It's just a matter of selecting which one does fit the most, or which fits the best for this specific mine site.
And if I
Yeah.
can jump here, Martin, you're right. There's some mines that are developing intensive meters per meter per year. For example, Raglan, we're doing 12 kilometer of drift per year. So it is a challenge to first retrofit the existing tunnels and then keep up with the new development. So choosing the right technology that is easy to train and maintain is a challenge. And you don't want two type of wireless communication. You want to choose one just to simplify, again, training diagrams, plans. It's been a challenge, but what I can recommend is visit some mine that has different options and choose the one that you prefer fits better for you.
So I'm hearing you, and there is a lot of technology out there that can be used to wirelessly connect people within the mine site. And expectations have become very high to deliver that communication to everybody within the mine, but not everybody is there. So how do we succeed in delivering data when we don't have that reliable and widespread underground wireless network?
Yeah, I would say it's a bit of an evolution. I hear what Milan's saying about you don't want to diversify your wireless environment too much because it becomes a bit of a maintenance challenge. But in reality, what I am seeing customers doing from our perspective is suiting their wireless deployments to the specific use cases. Of course, they have kind of a base wireless technology that they really try and hit most use cases with. And early days, that was Wi-Fi, just because everybody understood how Wi-Fi worked, and it's relatively simple from an operations perspective. And then as the use cases became more mobile sensitive with remote and autonomous type of operation, and also, as Milan was saying, the environment changes so fast that the amount of coverage that you need becomes very large, and that gets to be quite challenging with Wi-Fi, just because of how many access points you need to put out there. And so that's where a lot of the exploration of the LTE and private LTE environments, and above, even in above ground, we're seeing private LTE environments start to come up. Licensing is definitely a challenge, and that's something that has really slowed some of that deployment above ground. But it's definitely answered a lot of those coverage questions, and it becomes a technology that can reach into new areas maybe a little bit quicker than Wi-Fi could. But it doesn't necessarily answer all the questions. We've had cases where customers have had a lot of trouble getting enough video bandwidth back from the face in their teleremote operations with LTE. And there's some people are waiting for 5G to answer some of that, and there is some really interesting technology coming on that, but it's not quite there yet in terms of the millimeter or the really high bandwidth type of backhaul. So we're still seeing a lot of requirement for hotspots of Wi-Fi, even if LTE becomes the backbone. And then there's another interesting data gathering environment that we're starting to see emerge. One really interesting use case that I've been working with a partner on is power cable management, where they're able to put a little watermelon around a power cable, and it's able to communicate back at really low bit rates. And if they were to do that with Wi-Fi or LTE, the battery would last maybe a month, right? And with some of the new 900 megahertz technologies, they're able to have these batteries last for many years. And so maintenance of those becomes more important. So it's not quite as simple as just picking one wireless technology and putting it everywhere. And you can make some strategic choices there and say, we're going to use this technology, say LTE, for 80% of what we need, and we're just not going to do the other stuff. But there is a compelling reason to actually have multiple wireless technologies on site in a lot of cases.
That's very interesting. Thanks for the perspective, Roland. I think that leads us to multiple wireless methodologies, but there's also various different communication systems for data, voice, other communication systems. How do you manage those as we bring them together, as we try to transition from one to the other? Is there a best practices way of managing those systems?
I can jump on what we did at our mine. I don't know about the rest. What I can share is what we've done. And Roland, you just brought up some very good thing where, yes, we use transitional wireless system until we put an LTE network. And I'll say it's the same for communication, for voice and data. I remember at the beginning, we were still struggling. Do we want to use a different wireless system for voice and another one for data? And at the end, we decided to keep it to one. And the LTE, or the cellular network, allow us to do it. Again, being an old mine, being in running for now 25 years, we have old spaces and old, let's say, legacy communication system, which is a VHF analog. To be able to do the transition, we keep both signal, we keep both antenna in the drift. We call it a leaky feeder, but our cable acting as an antenna, and we created bridges. So the bridge allow us from a cell phone to talk to someone on the VHF. And when I say talking, I'm using the CB, the push to talk. And we'll keep it probably for the rest of 2022 until everyone is well trained. And we started last year receiving data and using teleremote with the LTE. So we had success using one type of wireless system to do data and voice communication. It was not, we had our journey, we still do, but we're proving that it's feasible.
That's
And the
great.
bridge is the key. The bridge really is a key for giving us time to give training and learning. We have problem even with the hardware on what holds the phone, what we call it, the car kit, the phone holder. We're in the Arctic, it's on a permafrost condition, so we have to heat the phone, or without that the battery will go away for in a couple of hours. We won't do the shift. Yeah, we need this transition and the bridge.
Yeah, I think, Lan, you touched on a few things, and I love the fact that we're talking about network options and communication options. And I think that there's so much detail into it, and some of the, like you mentioned, the holder and so on. There's charging methodology of mobile devices. There's just so many things you need to think of beyond. So ensure you'll end up getting surprises. You may not get the same surprises Milan's experiencing at Raglan, but there'll be things that you need to do it'll be catch you by surprise as far as implementing. Next, I'm going to step away from the pure technology aspect of it. And
Greg, maybe I'll just add to that quickly.
Sure.
In addition to some of these glitches, if you want to call them that, there's also the building trust with the reliability part. And it, as much as we say there's ubiquitous coverage of data in the mine, it's just not quite there yet. And there is some trust that's been built with the old peak push-to-talk radio system that's just hard to replace. And so I think, Milan, you're doing a really smart thing by just having that overlap for a period of time. And that period of time can, be different for every customer depending on how quick you build trust with the actual data environment. So I just wanted to add that in, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Roland. Great perspective.
Yeah, don't forget, and you're totally right, Roland. Building the trust. The day we cut the signal, if it doesn't work, the truck won't move ore. So it's a big risk. And more than just the reliability of the system we install is the trust. You're 100% right on that.
Great stuff. Yeah, as I said, I'm going to pull away from the pure tech part of things right now and getting access to the data necessarily, but then a little bit about what we do with the data. And there's been a recent push to centralize operations centers, particularly in remote operations, which we're talking about in this session. I'm wondering if anyone can talk about examples that they have in mining companies who are delivering a remote operations center.
Yeah, maybe I can start. I have quite a few examples, companies that have already shared their stories about the remote operations or integrated remote operation centers that they have implemented. For example, here in Canada, ArcelorMittal, I mean, they have 1,400 kilometers between the mine and the headquarters, and they have complete remote operations installed in Gueuil near Montreal. This is pretty impressive. It's a great center. So they manage everything. I visited this site, and it's pretty amazing. They manage everything they see. They use analytics. They identify large rocks and things like that. So very great example. Tofogasta Minerals also, they've implemented it so that they have their engineers in their headquarters that can support operations people at the mine site. So another great example. Barrick Gold also implemented it. There's a lot of great examples. One that I really appreciate sharing with customers is with the Black Rock mine in Africa. They have a 10-meter video wall display that shows everything. So from the headquarters, from a management perspective, you can see everything that's happening at the mine site. From a financial perspective, from an operations perspective. So they really are combining all the data from all those disparate systems all together to present one version of the whole activities that the organization is leveraging. So for now, I see a lot of companies are leveraging technology to have remote visibility. For example, another great example from a sustainability perspective is BHP. They've implemented it across all their sites in Australia. I think at the time they presented, there were 35 sites that were being monitored, but they now have complete visibility of their 35 sites with a kind of a Google Map approach with the Esri platform. So they see in real time all their sites, and whenever they want, there's a potential environmental deviation coming in, they will deep dive into that specific site from a graphical perspective using a kind of a Google Map approach. And they can deep dive and see real time activities, real time operations, and of course, take actions before any major deviation happens. So this is a very good example that BHP has shared lately. So yes, a lot of companies are actually leveraging technology to implement remote operation
Martin,
center. It is possible today. Yes.
Martin, you mentioned, you talked about monitoring. Are you also seeing these operations start to drive more autonomous operation in some parts of the operation? So is that a progression that you start with monitoring and then you move more towards autonomy?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, Gartner describes it as a continuous intelligence journey. So it's really the first analytics is visual analytics. So it's descriptive analytics. So it's people analyzing data. So that's the first step in any analytics
Right.
journey. You have to see what's happening before thinking about using artificial intelligence and all of these things. And then, of course, the next step is to now that you see what's happening, you can investigate, identify conditions that lead to environmental deviation, that leads to mechanical failures or whatever. And then you implement those conditions for real-time condition monitoring analysis. So this is a second step. And then you move on with predictive analytics where you build predictions. And then that's where you start thinking about prescriptions. So this is where we
Mhm.
see some companies have started thinking about leveraging AI for autonomous operation, not just for autonomous trucks. Of course, autonomous trucks are there. Some companies are using it more and more, actually. But now we're talking about autonomous operations from an operations perspective. And yes, there are mining companies that I work with that have started leveraging AI to implement autonomous operations. I can share the ones that have presented in the past, and the one that I'm thinking of is with Cemex. This is in the cement industry, but again, the same applies for mining. And I can share that story because they have presented. But Cemex, they manage kilns, so large rotary ovens that are operated at 1500 degrees Celsius. So it's very complex to operate. And now they are gathering all that data remotely, of course, and using artificial intelligence to be able to send back to the control systems the optimal set points for operations. So this is a very good example of autonomous operation that was presented in 2018. It was a pilot project, but of course today they're moving much further. But so the idea here is, again, is to start small. Start with visual analytics, descriptive analytics, where people can see. That's the first step. And it also helps empowering your people, empowering employees, operators. They will do a good job if they know what's happening. If they don't know what's happening, chances are they will do whatever they think that is good. But if they see what's happening, and this is the Syncrude example I gave earlier, a great example. Operators now, they can see what they're doing live in real time, and it helped them
Mhm.
reduce the incidents from a dumping perspective. So very good example here.
That's great. And I wanted to pull on this a little further from a site survivability approach. So as we start to investigate what we can pull away from traditional on-site control centers and move it into a centralized process, what factors, what kind of functionality are you seeing being pulled away, the traditional functionality? And to ensure that your mine can survive, what kind of redundancy are you seeing people put into networks and so on, so that functionality can be pulled out from site and without risk to operations?
Maybe I'll talk a little bit about our whole management strategy at Cisco has really evolved over the last 5 or 6 years, and we're still on that journey, right? But we've seen so many benefits of centralization from a management perspective, where you're able to administer policy, you're able to administer security measures, you're able to really get a global view of your operation by centralizing some of the administration. But you bring up a really good point, is that especially for mining, where you have some of these connectivity challenges that Milan talked about earlier, you do need the survivability. And so what we've done in the networking space is we put a division between some of the functions, right? So there, or the administrative layer, we've pulled into the cloud, but the actual data, what we call data plane or forwarding of data, all the data transmission stays local. And then in the cases where you have sort of extreme isolation, you do need some of the control plane to be local as well, to make sure that if there is a disconnection, that you're not cutting off functions that can prevent you from operating. So I'm speaking about that from a network perspective, but I'm sure the same principles apply in general operation. In fact, what we've seen in the LTE world is is one of the challenges in deploying LTE for some of our customers is that the traditional way of deploying LTE is in an island, right? And it doesn't really interact super thoroughly with the rest of the enterprise. And so some of the challenges have become, how do you manage identity past the SIM-based management that LTE typically comes with? How do you integrate that into the rest of the enterprise from a policy perspective? And all of that happens really well centrally. And so there's a lot of advantage in pulling that into the cloud from an administration perspective, but you don't want to sacrifice that locally. And so there's caching algorithms and all kinds of things that need to be put into the system to ensure that survivability is there. So great questions to ask, and especially if you have prolonged outages in the course of a year. You want to definitely be looking at, okay, what does operation look like when I'm disconnected?
That's excellent. Thanks, Roland. So I'm going to move on. You touched on cloud, and obviously the cloud offers a tremendous opportunity to take advantage of compute power, to be able to store data more easily, to access data remotely more easily. But there is challenges there, even around site survivability and so on. In a hybrid environment, using cloud and on-premise solutions, I'd like to open it to the group to talk a little bit about the challenges of that and what the opportunities are of taking advantage of a hybrid cloud platform.
One thing I could throw in is, when you're using cloud or hybrid, is cybersecurity, Greg. Is that something you want to touch now or later? Because as soon as you open your data, your information, that's going to kick in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the biggest challenges of cloud computing and worrying about what data should be out there compared to on-prem. Yes, please go.
I can say that for us, which is part of Glencore Nickel, the cybersecurity is pretty rigid. And we were hiding behind the network or bandwidth restraint to say we cannot open the cloud. So that's our excuse, and we follow cybersecurity guidelines just because of that, keeping everything in premise. And we had to select a couple of suppliers that are able to access our server to help us to troubleshoot, but we have very small list of suppliers that can do this. I'm not an expert in that, but I can say that it's one of the reason we don't use a hybrid LZNB communication, which will be resolved at the end of 2023 with a cable, fiber cable that will arrive at Raglan. It's the cybersecurity, so we just close it, keep it everything on premise. We're scared and just waiting and see what the market is doing. But I guess Roland and Martin, you guys might have more experience than I do, more knowledge. So I'll let you guys.
I think if maybe Martin and Roland, you can speak about for sites that are not bandwidth constrained, and I think Milan will probably learn a little bit because he won't be soon, and people will become calling about certain services that they want to use, and you're not going to be able to say no at that point. So maybe the two of you can discuss that.
Well, the security conversation is an interesting one, just because, as Milan said, he's not unique in this. I think every mine has the easiest answer is, let's put an air gap in play, and if the stuff can't get out or in, then security is going to be fine. And as you get more connected, that's more of a challenge. I don't know that you can actually realistically operate an air gap today. I don't know if that's possible, quite frankly, just because you have so many security zones present in almost every physical location. And so for someone to move data physically from one location to another can jeopardize a lot of the security practices you put in play from a connectivity perspective. And so you really have to think through in a much more systematic and methodical way, how do you protect that data, and not just integrity, but just that it doesn't get into the wrong hands. And so there is a whole practice around that that's pretty rigorous. And even the hybrid examples I gave earlier are not trivial when it comes to adhering to some of these frameworks for security. And I lived over that when I talked about control goes to the cloud and data stays local and all of that, but they're interacting in the same equipment. And so how do you have a cloud security zone in the same equipment they have a local security zone? there has to be some due diligence from a security perspective to ensure you're not compromising anything. So it's not a simple answer, Greg. It's something you definitely want to take serious and invest some money in when you're going to connect to outside entities, for sure.
And if I may add, the security aspect is one critical aspect, but also the reliability, if I may say it like that, aspect. I was just having a conversation yesterday with a mining company. I mean, they have sites in Africa and they are struggling because they have to think about an on-prem solution for almost everything related to their operations because they are struggling with fiber optics being eaten by animals. This is real life situation that they're facing. So they had a cloud strategy. They had to review their cloud strategy because they're struggling with that. So this is a real life scenario that we've had a good conversation about. How I think hybrid is a must. You have to think about hybrid solutions. You cannot do, for example, we have customers, Norsk Hydro in Brazil, for example. They've leveraged the cloud quite extensively, and it's amazing what they're doing. They have 3 mine sites north of Brazil, and Brazil is huge, and they have their headquarters in on the south. And of course, it's hard to get everybody on site. So their engineers, their experts are most of the time they are at the headquarters, and now they're leveraging the digital twin. They're leveraging the cloud to bring that data all together. Of course, so this is an example where, and then the engineers can analyze the data, provide feedback to the operations people in real time. So for example, we have a truck that might have an issue, so maybe you can reduce your speed so that we can increase the lifetime of the truck for your shift, so that you can complete your shift, and then we'll bring it to maintenance. We'll prepare the maintenance activities. So all of these things can be done remotely, while there's an interaction between the operations people and the engineering or maintenance team in this case. So I think but from an operational perspective at the mine site, of course, they're not relying on the cloud, if I may say it like that. So they are operating, they have the whole visibility, they have the information they need to operate. But of course, in this case, it's an optimization perspective. So I think hybrid is the word that we need to take into consideration here.
So let's assume at some point a company resolves the cybersecurity issues. They're feeling comfortable with redundancy and getting the data from their operations to the cloud. There's so much operational data that we can put out in the cloud. In your experience, where should companies focus if they're just getting started with operations type data in cloud environment? What are some of the areas that they can start with? What are the key value drivers, and where can they look to achieve value in the short term?
Are you talking about a solution? Which data to start? What's the
I think categories of data would be like, is it equipment data? Is it data from a mine production point of view? Things like that. Where can because there's so much of it there. Where can companies start to actually achieve value early with the cloud environments?
As an extraction, on the extraction side, not the processing side, we're tackling 2 places. One is the hauling, so load, and not only load, but camera to see the box, how full they are. So that's for really operation. And the other side is the maintenance and the low-hanging fruit. It's not even the telemetry alarms, it's engine hours. So just bring the engine hours and location of the vehicle for the mechanic into your ERPs, that when you have your scheduled maintenance, you can see, okay, where is the vehicle? How many engine hours? Do I go ahead with this scheduled maintenance, or do I exchange it with another one that it's more urgent? So if that's your question, that's where I say we're tackling on both sides. One is operation, and the other one is maintenance, and it's very simple things. With just load and engine hours, you can do, and location, real-time location. How many hours does a miner can spend looking for an equipment?
Milan, is that all local? That's all processed locally, though. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We have satellite
if you're
like a Google Earth, and we can point an area when it's on surface, and when it's on underground, we're using either a table or a 3D map. We're using both.
Okay. I was just going to add that if that's a really helpful commentary on kind of which data sources to go after and operational pieces. one thing I'd add is to say that the first ones to push the data to the cloud, though, plays off of the reliability piece and the security piece as well. So analytics, the actual modeling piece, and I'm going to get into Martin in a second, but the analytics piece where you're modeling the models, that part is really, really helpful to do in the cloud, just because you have so much compute and there's not an operational dependency, and you can do all of that in the cloud. You also don't have the same security concerns with data that's disconnected from day-to-day operation, so historical data. So I don't know if that answers part of what you're wondering about, Greg, but I think that's where I'm seeing the cloud adoption being first. And anything that's more operational, like what Milan was talking about, does still stay local, very much so, for both reliability and security reasons.
And there's another area where I see the cloud is where I see a lot of value in leveraging the cloud or cloud technologies is when you start working with OEM vendors. For example, I work a lot with those vendors, Wear Minerals, FL Schmidt, Caterpillar, SKF Bearings, all of them. And of course, for example, from a chemical perspective, mining companies are using chemicals. So chemical companies, they know how their chemicals can react or can be most efficient, but they don't have access to the information at the mine site. From a data sharing perspective, the cloud technology can become very interesting because, of course, as a miner, you might accept sharing data to that chemical company because they can help you improve your performance. Same applies for your trucks. You might accept sharing data from your trucks to that truck manufacturer so that the manufacturer can help you improve performance on your assets. Same as fixed equipments or bearings. I was in Sweden last November working with SKF Bearings, and that's exactly what they're looking for is how can we help our customers, we're working with the same customers, mining companies, and how can we help them improve their reliability of all their assets when they're using our bearings. So this is a very good example where the cloud can be leveraged quite extensively, where you as a miner can accept sharing some part of your data to the manufacturer, where the manufacturer can analyze that data and then provide feedback to the operations people.
Great stuff, guys. I see that Neha has just asked people online if they have any questions to post them on the comments, so that we're able to have an interactive session with people on the line. So I think one of the things I'd like to discuss a little bit as we move into cloud technology and then moving into actual delivering information back to the users, whether they're offsite or on-site in a mobile aspect. Access to data that's a growing expectation too, and for all roles in the mine. And so how do you see the importance of delivering information to mobile workers, whether it's on mobile phones within the operations or outside the firewall in a remote mining environment?
I can jump in and
yeah, I'll start maybe, and then Milan can give me a reality check in his world. There's so many applications for so many different systems that are available in mobile devices now, from mobile HMIs through talk systems we talked about earlier, right, on devices. And so I think there is, especially for roles that have a fairly complex nature to them, whether you're traveling around, whether you're moving from one part of the mine to another, those complex roles probably have the most value associated with devices. And that's where I see those being adopted first, just because they're jumping from one type of task to another in a lot of cases. And there's a lot of information that can flow to a device like that from one task to the next that can be super valuable without having to always check back and get more paper or get more clarification through voice. So huge value there. The other side of the spectrum that I see is when you've got big mitts on, it's really hard to work with a mobile device. So you have to work with that trade-off. On the one hand, mobile devices are super familiar to everyone in their personal life, right? And so it's not like it's brand new technology to people, but just fitting it into the actual working flow and working environment, that's, I think, where we have to figure some things out yet.
Yeah. Martin, do you want to go ahead and I talk after?
Go ahead. You started. I'll talk after. No worries.
Yeah, in the learning curves or change management, we talked earlier, Martin. I think it was you, or forgot. We're talking about step for the
Yeah.
network. So in those steps, what we try, and I was talking to someone at Valley last week, is that we use a control room as an air traffic control. So you bring the information to that coordinator. I've seen that also at ArcelorMittal. So from there, you use the voice. Even if everyone has a smartphone, not everyone knows how to play with apps. And especially when you get into ruggedized cell phone and special app, just finding the button to open it is different from what you're used to with a Samsung or an iPhone. So I'll say that our approach is to bring to the control room, and we start to give tablet to the technical group. So geologists, engineers, supervisor. That's how we start slow. But obviously, our goal is to get to that scheduler where every miner has their next task in a tablet or phone or something.
Yeah, and what we see, a lot of companies are leveraging those mobile devices, mainly, and most of the time we see they start with the maintenance crew, electrical people, and mechanical people. And what is it from a visual inspection perspective? If they want to take notes on for the
Mhm.
maintenance planner or the reliability engineer, this is what we see. A lot of companies have already presented that. Another great example I can share is with Newcrest Mining in Australia. They shared a very good presentation. They actually won a technology award with that presentation, with what they've done there. It helped them increase the throughput by, let me see here, 650,000 tons in the first 6 months. So it's pretty impressive what they have done. So basically, in a nutshell, I won't get into all the details here, but in a nutshell, what they did is of course, they collected the data and they presented it as a step-by-step approach, and it's really interesting the way they presented it. First, you need to connect to the data source. You need to collect the data. This is exactly what they presented. Then analyze that data. Of course, like I said earlier, with descriptive analytics, with people looking at the data, and that's where they're leveraging different technologies, tablets, phones, even glasses. So they're leveraging all those technology depending on who needs to have access to what data. And then, of course, after that, they're leveraging artificial intelligence. And this is the use case that they have presented, using machine learning to help them improve their crushed ore bin issues that they were having. So without getting into the details of this specific use case, but talking about the mobility aspect, I think a great example of leveraging data. I mean, if glasses are the optimal way for you to see the information, then that should be it. It exists, it's there today. And what I always refer to, 10 years ago, I was doing conferences on health and safety, and I was talking about the fact that we should be able to predict safety issues with all the gaming technologies that exist on the market today. It should be used actually for the industry, for the mining industry, in the mining industry. And now we see it coming slowly, because in gaming, you people already know the movements that you're doing. Not people, but the system is able to
Mhm.
detect the movement you're doing, is able to detect the weight that you can carry, and things like that. So it's pretty impressive what technology is available today. It's just a matter of how can we leverage that from a mining operations perspective. But the example with Newcrest, with those glasses, those phones, tablets usage is a very good one.
Thanks for the insight, Martin, Milan, and Roland. And time goes by fast. We're already at the top of the hour. So I did want to reach out to people with questions. I don't see any posted at this point, but I think it's been marvelous insight by the three of you, and I really appreciate it. And I think some great follow-up discussions can happen as well going forward with our next few sessions. I think we teased upon some of the things that we'll be talking about in more detail in the session in June and August. I hope that everybody's interested in the technical chats we had today, and how that will grow into how this data is being used, and how it can provide more value to our mining companies across the world. In closing, again, thank you to Milan, Martin, and Roland for all their valuable insight. Thanks to Neha from PACE for helping us put all this together. She's the coordinator in the background. And finally, BDT is looking for additional sponsorship. There's 5 other streams. There's a community and collaboration stream for building minings in remote areas. Development and design for these remote mines is another stream. Methods and machinery. So what considerations for the mining methods that you will have when building out mobile equipment, for instance, and what already exists. Power and possibilities for generating power in remote locations. And finally, people and partnerships. Where do we access qualified workforce and so on. So if you are interested in being a panelist or being a sponsor in these streams, please contact Neha. I think everybody knows how to get a hold of Neha. And finally, please share the podcast link at listen.bdt.network. Once again, thank you for everybody involved in today's session. And I hope we provided you with some insight into how to get data from your operations into the hands of your users. Thanks very much.
Thank you.